Yes, it's time for emerging issues. Number 13, welcome into the YouTube audience, Zig or Jag, and B, obviously a little bit of a play on words here with the Jaguar and Panthers. Really interesting week this week for coaches because if you own Nathan Cleary and or Isaah, it might be crunch time.
Well, 100%. And we've kind of learnt this week as well. Like, if you've got two of those guns, plus the carnage that can happen out of HIA's injuries, like we'll talk about Matt Nicholson a little bit later, you're going to be forced into doing trades again, which you might not have necessarily wanted to. So, going into the buy rounds, it's getting nitty gritty, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I think the Panthers are a really interesting case study because of the high ownership of Yo and Cleary, who we're going to focus on in this edition. It really might make or break a few coaches' seasons, so let's have a bit of a look at the environment first by looking at their upcoming fixtures. So round 11, of course, they have the bye, they will not play. For Origin players, they won't play against the Knights in round 12. They'll have an Origin game in Brisbane that'll be exactly 17 days after the game they just played against the Cowboys. Panthers players playing Origin can back up in round 13. They've got the Sunday 4:05 game at home against Parramatta. Round 14, just a normal standalone bye round with the Roosters off. They play the Tigers. Round 15, they have the bye. Notwithstanding that, they've got an Origin game in Perth that they would be in camp for. Round 16, they're away at the Warriors over in Auckland. Saturday 3 p.m. game. Round 17, they've got a standalone bye round game. So just the Roosters off again. Bulldogs are the opponent for the Panthers there. And then round 18, they've either got a bye or they're playing Origin in Sydney with the Eels backing up again. Now, looks a bit convenient. They get to back up against the Eels twice in Sydney at the same time slot. But that Warriors game, which we're going to get to in a second, that looks like the key one where these Origin players may not be backing up.
Yeah, 100%. Ivan Cleary's obviously come out in the media saying that his Origin guys will not back up in that game. So your Clearys, your Yos, I don't think many people are owning Edwards or Brian To'o, who I will presume go to Origin. But it's mainly those two big guns, and then you start including the guys who have the bye in that week as well, like your Payne Haas's, your Terrell Mays. If he goes to Origin, are they going to back up? How many Origin guys are you actually carrying? So it's pretty much now time to really think on what you're going to do with these main guys.
It is, and you'll be able to see there for those on the YouTube audience the quote there from Ivan Cleary that was from Sydney Morning Herald where he said referring to the Penrith Origin representatives, won't be playing in Auckland. It's ridiculous. I don't have a choice because, again, they play an Origin game in Perth, away game in New Zealand. Very tough. But you mentioned it there. It is going to be really interesting because I think with Isaah Yeo, I know for me I was probably leaning towards selling this week, but the thing that we can have happen to us, and might be the case with a certain Toby Couchman, who I know is in your team as well as mine, is if a player like that gets injured, it might mean that you then hold on to an Origin gun like Isaah Yeo and grab another guy that has a different set of coverage to cover an absence of a Couchman.
Yeah, that's it. And I think, we're really focused on the buy scheduling now, which is why we're talking about these Origin guys and how it's going to affect your buy planning. But that buy planner is always a moving piece, right? Like I had one plan and it literally changes after one game where it was a guy I was going to sell, like let's say a Katoga or a Starling. And then all of a sudden they have a good game and it's like, oh, now my line of thinking has changed. I think I might hold those guys because they can cover me in round 12 for certain spots, but now Couchman's out, I got to make a different move. So it's always constantly moving. And then it's just, at the end of the day, you review on, do you want to hold these guys? Do you feel like they're season long keepers? And do you have the cover to look after them essentially? Or will you fall behind in the ranks because you are holding on to them? All those kind of decisions you have to weigh up.
You certainly do. And the thing is, with these two players, obviously, they are good enough to be in the best 17 for you at the end of the season. The Panthers don't have any buys after round 18, so they should be available for the rest of those. And if they're fighting for the 8, you best believe they'll be playing every single round. Much like they did last year when they needed to fight for that minor premiership. They rolled them out pretty much every week until they eventually went and won the premiership. The other thing as well, mate, is that we've spoken about that minor buy round rule change, and I think what this means is depending on the players that you have in your side and the teams that they play for, it might be quite convenient for them to miss around 13. For coaches that don't have any Sharks, Finns or Bulldogs, or not too many of those, it's not much of an issue. But maybe around 16, which I know you highlighted a couple of weeks ago, that might be the one that breaks the proverbial back of the camel because you might have two Origin guys that don't back up in the form of maybe one of these Panthers and say a Payne Haas, and then you've got 4 or 5 Sea Eagles, Dragons, and Bulldogs, could get very awkward very quickly.
Well, we both know that those 3 teams in round 16 have pretty popular coverage. So Toby Couchman's, Dylan Egan's, and Hamish Stewart for the Dragons. You like your Max Kings and your Jacob Carrazes for the Dogs. And is it Manly? So newly Jazz Tavaga and Ruben Garrick, So all of a sudden it's just like, are you going to be scrounging for a 13? Knowing that Cleary is also not going to be part of that plan and knowing that Yo's not going to be part of that plan. So maybe if you look at it that and you want to plan that far forward, then maybe that's when your time to move on for them.
It could be, and I think as well what you might even look to do is maybe bank some trades in round 13. I know we've mentioned that there's not an awful lot of Sharks and Finns that are going to be in people's teams. There might be a couple of Bulldogs, but outside of that, there's probably not going to be that many red dots. That might be around where you save trades. And I think the decision for these 2 players, might come down to the expectations of a particular coach. If you've got a coach that, let's just say they're ranked outside the top 5,000 and they're looking to try and get in the top 2.5, you might take the risk and sell both Cleary and Yo, hoping that you can get more points in against against coaches that hold on to those players. Whereas if you're maybe happy with where you're currently sitting at the moment, you might play it conservative and go, well, I'm just going to bank on the fact that in round 13, I'm going to have a gun starting 13, and in round 16 and hopefully round 19, I might as well.
Yeah, well, that's where you can look at it as well for round 13. Like looking at my buy plan, right now I don't have anyone out. I've got 21 players. So to me, if I was a Yo owner, which I'm not, but if I was, it'd be like, well, maybe I move him on to someone who's got a round 13 buy but covers something further down. So I've got a loop option, or it's better for down the track. There's multiple ways that you can look at it. The good thing, I guess, with Yo as well, I'm using him as a case study because I think that Cleary's definitely a hold. But Yo's coming off a great score. So it's not like you've lost much money on him. And he's, he always does what it says on the tin, but never has 100 in him, whereas, Cleary does. So, if you ever think of those 2 and you want to get rid of the 1, then I'm thinking it's Yo. But if you've got the coverage to hold him, I think he's a hold.
Yeah. And, as to when you sell, I guess that depends on how you go next week. You mentioned Katoga before. Panthers. The Eels play the first game in round 11. So potentially you might wait and see, have Katoga in the loop slot. And then if Katoga goes good, you might hold on to Yo and Cleary and take that decision 1 week deeper.
Yeah, exactly right. It's a revolving machine that you're essentially using every game. It changes for me. So, right now, to me, it'd be sell Yo because he's going to be missing 4 of those six games in the bye rounds. But there's also the argument to hold him. So, it's just a matter of what your team makeup is.
Yep, that's it. I've said it quite a few times already this season. It depends on your team composition. So that might be a good spot to leave emerging issues for this week. Thank you for those viewing on YouTube. Be sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and check out the full podcast on the podcast platform.